I really, really liked it. And one of the reasons I liked it was like it's set in the 1950s, and the story is of a young woman, played by Saoirse Ronan, who travels from Enniscorthy in County Wexford to America. She says, I'm off to America. I'm away to America. It's a decision which she doesn't appear to have had very much to do with. It seems to have been organised by her sister. And she's terrified about leaving her home, about leaving her mother, about leaving her sister, about leaving the life that she knows. When she's on the boat, she meets some other people who've travelled to America from Ireland. One of them says, it's nice to talk to people who don't know your auntie. The idea of actually going somewhere where anonymity is possible. And she travels to America, to Brooklyn, which is actually, most of it is Montreal. And in Montreal, at first, in Brooklyn, but actually Montreal, in Brooklyn, she feels like a fish out of water. She doesn't know, that she can stay there. She has this terrible sense of longing of being displaced until she meets a young man called Tony, who seems to give her a reason to want to stay where she is now. He opens up the possibility of her future, that in fact in Ireland she's a daughter with a past, but here she may be a woman with a future. And he invites her to come and see his family, who introduce her to Italian American life, for which she has practiced by learning how to eat spaghetti. Here's a clip.
Hey, how did you learn to eat spaghetti like that?
I've been taking lessons.
Lessons? Like in a class? You can do that. Maybe I could teach it.
No, Diana, who lives in the boarding house with me, cooked me some spaghetti and made me try and eat it without making a mess.
So, what do you eat in Ireland? Just Irish stew?
Not just,
So first of all, I should say that we don't like Irish people.
Hey,
Frankie.
What? We don't. That is a well-known fact.
Why, Frankie?
Because a big gang of Irish beat Maurizio up and he had to get stitches. And because all the cops around here are Irish, nobody did anything bad.
There's probably two sides to it. I might have said something I shouldn't. I can't remember now.
No, because they beat you up.
Anyway, they probably weren't all Irish.
No, they just had red hair and big legs.
Right.
Ow!
Excuse us.
So it's adapted from the novel by Colin Bean with a screenplay by Nick Hornby, which I think is brilliantly sort of empathetic, something which really understands the novel, but also understands that you have to make a transition from novel to screen. One of the things about the novel is very, very understated. And I think one of the great joys of this film, but also one of the problems, one of the difficulties, is that it is superbly understated. It's directed by John Crowley, who made Intermission some time ago, which was a really sort of great, really sort of attention-grabbing, unexpectedly punchy feature. And Saoirse Ronan, who really hasn't put a foot wrong since getting that Oscar nomination for Atonement, who just literally goes from role to role, apparently with the best possible decision-making in the world. She's an extraordinary talent. I mean, firstly, the way, I mean, she appears to be able to act with her pupils. She is one of the very few actors I've ever seen who seems to be able to make her pupils contract and dilate at will. She has really, really specific physical manners. There's nothing in her performance. It kind of reminds you of seeing Meryl Streep early on, the way in which everything about the performance, it's not just to do with what you're saying, it's how you're saying, it's how you're standing, it's your posture, it's your gestures, it's the tiniest nuances. Brilliant screen acting. And she also has that kind of very young and old face that is mercurial, in as much as, particularly for this story, it's able to tell the story of somebody who is, basically on the brink of being an independent character, but then finds himself called back to Ireland, and then wonders whether they any longer belong in Brooklyn or in Ireland. So what she's playing is a character who's basically a divided soul, somebody who is both a daughter and and an independent woman, somebody who is torn also between two potential love interests, somebody who is displaced nationally and geographically and now wonders where it is that she belongs. In the course of this storytelling, obviously music is very, very important. There is a superb sequence when she's serving a Christmas dinner to the down and outs who built the tunnels, built the bridges. And someone gets up and sings a song which is beautifully done. And you can see there's this montage of faces of people who have come to Ireland and come to America and done extraordinary things, and yet somehow now become adrift. And the whole thing leads up to this realization that there is an entire dispossessed community of which she is part of one, but she is also finding her own feet. So I think the way in which the music works, the score incidentally is beautiful. How lovely to hear a score that manages to sort of, to pluck the heartstrings, but without being laid on with a trowel. And in fact, the way in
lots
which
of pipes.
No, it's really beautifully understated. And there are moments in which the problem with scoring is always to do with, particularly when you're talking about something which is emotional or romantic, how much do you have to tell the story through the music, and how much do you need to step back? And I think actually what's happening with the score is that it's brilliantly judged. It's absolutely brilliantly judged as to this is just how much information you need. Also, superb work from the costume and hair and makeup and production design. Again, with the internal story being told by external trappings, which perfectly mirror what's happening to our central character, to Elisha, and the way in which her journey is being told. Not through sort of huge signposting, not through really sort of glaring signage, but so subtlety is the key to it. Now, the problem with that is if you make a film that genuinely is subtle, it's often very hard to sell. I mean, it's interesting if you look at the posters for Brooklyn. I think they're struggling to tell you what it is that's great about the film, because when was the last time you saw a trailer that said this film is quite subtle and actually a bit, it's to do with understated, because that's not how trailers work. So actually when you look at the publicity for it, it makes it seem more ripe, more melodramatic than it is. In that thing about, which I was saying before, about it harks back to the classic age of the woman's picture, Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, those kind of movies from the 30s and 40s, but not in a melodramatic way, but in a way in which it's a story about an emotional and physical journey. It also taps into a great heritage of émigré cinema. I mean, to some extent, Jim Sheridan's In America is a distant cousin of all this. But what it manages to do is to tell its story at exactly the right pace in a way that is so, I think, unfashionably anachronistic that you just find yourself wondering why it is that movies aren't made like this. I mean, to say it's a very old-fashioned movie is a great compliment. I don't mean like an old-fashioned movie like a creaky off. I mean an old-fashioned movie like movies that were built from the character up. And right at the centre of that is Saoirse Ronan. But you have, absolutely superb supporting performances. Donald Gleeson, who manages to be this kind of fairly late-in-the-day love interest without seeming in any way contrived. You've got Jim Broadbent as Father Flood, who is able to play Father Flood as a completely benign character, because the complexity that Saoirse Ronan is bringing to her role means that in doing that, it doesn't seem in any way like you're making some kind of thumbnail sketch of it. Julie Walters as the very funny and very comedic landlady, but again, being able to nuance that performance, not play it as a totally broadly comic performance, bring it back into something which is more matriarchal, more maternal. I loved it. I mean, I really did. I sat there, and what's really lovely is it's a film that works at its own pace, at its own speed. It's not overstated. It's not melodramatic. It's not overwrought. It's not to do with surging dramatic statements. It's to do with something that you just completely get engulfed in. And absolutely, Saoirse Ronan is central to that. Her performance is brilliant. But what's really brilliant about it, it's not grandstanding. It's not a performance that stands up and shouts, "Look at me, look how much I'm suffering and anguishing." That's what a great performance looks like. It's a performance that says, I completely believe in this person. I completely believe in their journey. I completely believe in the circumstance that they find themselves in. And I want things to work out for them. But also the other great thing about the film is it's not afraid of being ambivalent and being ambiguous, of saying there are not simple answers to these questions.